In the town of Ashford Hollow, where the nights were longer than they should have been, and the woods pressed against every edge of life, a dog wouldn't stop barking. Every midnight, without fail, he planted himself before an old oak at the edge of the Callahan property and howled like he was calling something out of the dark. The neighbors said he'd gone mad. Sheriff Nolan thought it was nuisance. But when the tree was finally cut open, the truth inside was so much worse than madness. It was a secret someone had tried very hard to bury. If you like stories that grip you in mystery and keep you uneasy long after, consider following along. It helps bring more of these to life. The first time Claire Callahan woke to the sound, she thought it was coyotes. That sharp, desperate yowl carried two close to her window, rattling through her chest. Then she realized it wasn't wild. It was Boone, her father's old German shepherd, grizzled at the muzzle, heavy in the hips, was barking like he'd been lit on fire. Claire threw on her robe and hurried out into the chill. The night air smelled of pine sap and damp earth. The farm was quiet otherwise, barn shut, chickens sleeping, the black field stretching out under a thin, crooked moon. Boone was at the far edge, front paws dug into the mud, face to a towering oak tree that stood longer than the Callahans had lived. He barked so hard it turned into horse coughing, then straight back to barking. "Boone!" Claire hissed, pulling her robe tight. "What's wrong with you?" He didn't turn, didn't flinch. His tail was rigid, ears flat, whole body trembling. She grabbed his collar and tugged. Normally the dog obeyed, weary but loyal. But this time he yanked forward, almost toppling her. "Jesus, what's gotten into you?" she muttered. Behind her, the porch light clicked on. Her father, Hank Callahan, leaned against the frame in his flannel shirt, cigarette glowing. His voice was gravel from years of smoking. He's been doing it all week. Claire looked back. At the tree. Always at that tree. Won't stop till morning. Goddamn dog's gonna drive me insane. "Maybe there's something in there," she said, nodding at the dark bulk of the oak. "Raccoons, maybe." Hank spat into the dirt. Then lemrot. Ain't no reason to be losing sleep over it. Claire tried again to pull Boone away, but the dog wouldn't budge. His bark shredded the stillness, echoing across the hollow. Finally, she gave up, retreating to the porch with her father. "You're not worried?" she asked. Hank inhaled smoke, eyes on the tree. "Worried? No. Dog's just getting old, losing his mind. Happens." But the way he said it, flat too fast, with his eyes fixed in a way that wasn't casual at all, lodged unease in her chest. The barking didn't stop. Not that night, not the next. Every midnight, Boone dragged himself to the oak and tore his voice raw at it. By the fifth night, Claire hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. She sat in the kitchen, head on her arms, where phone buzzed. It was Ben Avery, the neighbor. "You gotta do something about that mutt," he said, voice tight with irritation. "My kids are crying every night. He don't shut up." I know. I'm trying." "He won't stop." "Then put him down," Ben snapped. "That dog's losing it." Claire hung up before she said something she'd regret. She glanced toward her father at the table. Hank was drinking his coffee black, staring out the window at nothing. He hadn't said much these last few days, except the occasional mutter that Boone should have been put down years ago. That thought alone chilled her. Hank never used to be cruel, not to Boone. He'd raised a dog from a pup. Something about the tree had him unsettled, though he'd never admit it. That evening, when Boone started his midnight ritual, Claire decided she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed a flashlight and marched to the oak. The beam cut across the bark, thick with age, ridged and gnarled. Nothing moved. No raccoons. No squirrels. No holes big enough for nesting. Boone circled the trunk, barking furiously, scraping the dirt with his claws. She pressed her hand against the bark. The tree felt colder than it should have. She leaned in, ear against the trunk. At first, nothing, just a night breeze. Then, faint, almost imagined, a sound like scratching. Her breath caught. She jerked back. "Dad!" she called, turning toward the porch. "Come here." But when Hank stepped out, Boone's barking drowned her words. And the moment she looked back at the tree, the scratching was gone. The next morning, Claire called the sheriff. Sheriff Nolan Hayes was a man who belonged in a bigger place. He had the look of someone always half out the door. Clean shave, trim uniform, neat hair. But his eyes carried exhaustion from years of Ashford Hollow small-town dramas. He listened without interrupting as Claire explained. When she finished, he looked past her at the oak, Boone still sitting at its base like a sentinel. "You're saying the dog thinks something's in there," Nolan said. "I heard it too. Something scratching. Trees solid." Nolan rapped it with his knuckles. "Maybe hollow in parts, but nothing unusual. Animals burrow all the time." "No," Claire insisted. "It wasn't an animal." Nolan's brows twitched. He knew better than to argue with a Callahan when they got that tone. Instead, he knelt by Boone, who gave him a low growl. "Not like him," Nolan muttered. "He used to like me." Claire folded her arms. "So? You're just going to ignore it." Nolan stood. "I'll send a deputy tomorrow with a saw. If something's trapped in there, we'll know." Hank, who'd been silent on the porch, spoke then. His voice carried across the yard like a hammer. "You'll do no such thing." Nolan turned. "Hank, that tree's been here longer than this town. You're not hacking apart, 'cause the dog's got fleas in his head." "It's just a saw cut," Nolan said carefully. "No." Hank's cigarette flared. "You cut that tree. You'll regret it." The silence that followed was sharp. Claire glanced between them, pulse racing. Nolan adjusted his belt, jaw tight. "Fine, but if this keeps up, I'll have to. Half the town's calling in complaints." He walked back to his cruiser. Boone's barking started again the moment the sheriff's door slammed shut. Claire turned to her father. "Why don't you want him to check it?" Hank didn't answer. He crushed his cigarette under his boot and went inside. That night, Claire couldn't sleep again. Boone's barking rattled through the walls. Around 2 a.m., she threw off her blanket, grabbed a flashlight, and went out. She pressed her ear to the tree once more. This time, the sound came clearer. Scratching. And, God help her, something else. A voice. Faint. Muffled. Almost childlike. She stumbled back, heart hammering. Boone lunged at the bark, teeth bared. The voice was gone. Claire clamped a hand over her mouth. Her first thought was that she'd lost her mind from lack of sleep. But then Boone turned, looked at her with those wild eyes, and whined. A soft, desperate sound she'd never heard from him before. Someone was inside that tree, and her father knew it. The next morning broke pale and restless, the kind of dawn that painted the fog low over the fields. Claire hadn't slept. Boone lay by the tree still, body slumped with exhaustion, but his eyes never left the trunk. Claire stood at the kitchen sink, watching her father move around the table like nothing was wrong. Hank poured his coffee, sat with the paper. His silence was louder than words. "You heard it too, didn't you?" she asked finally. Hank didn't look up. "Heard what?" "The voice. From the tree." His spoon clinked against the mug. "You need sleep?" Claire slammed the counter. "Don't do that. Don't treat me like I'm crazy." Hank's jaw worked. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then quietly, "Drop it, Claire." The words chilled her worse than the voice itself. By afternoon, a patrol car pulled up. Deputy Travis Miller stepped out, lugging a saw. He was younger than Nolan, broad-shouldered but with a face that hadn't seen much of life beyond Ashford Hollow. "Morning," he said. "Sheriff sent me. Says we're cutting her open. See what's inside." Hank came storming from the porch. "No, you're not." Travis blinked. "Sir, with respect." "You don't have it." I said no. Town's filing complaints. Sheriff says. "I don't give a damn what the town says." Hank's voice cracked sharp. "Nobody touches that tree." Claire stepped between them. "Dad, stop. If there's something in there." "There's nothing," Hank barked. His eyes flashed at her, rage, but underneath it, something else. Fear. Travis shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I'm just doing my job." Hank's hand twitched to the side, like he was reaching for something that wasn't there. Then, slowly, he backed toward the porch. "You'll regret it. I swear you will." Travis glanced at Claire. What's his problem?" She didn't answer. The saw bit into the bark with a low grind. Boone howled so loud it hurt. He snapped and lunged at the blade, forcing Claire to hold him back by the collar. The wood split reluctantly, fibers shrieking, until the saw chewed a line wide enough to peel away. The smell hit first. Rot, sour and human, leaching from the cut. Travis gagged, yanking back. Christ almighty! Claire covered her nose. Her stomach churned. Travis steadied himself, pressed the saw deeper, then pried a slab of bark loose. Behind it, darkness. A hollow space inside the trunk. Too large, too deliberate. He angled his flashlight. The beam caught with planks, nailed against the inside like crude walls. And behind those boards, fabric, torn cloth. Something that might have once been a mattress. Claire's breath hitched. "That's a room." "A room," Travis whispered. From the shadows came movement. Claire stiffened. Boone roared against his collar. Something shifted inside. Then clawing. The board shook, dust raining down. A sound rose from behind them. Not animal. Not exactly human. A wail. High, thin, broken. Travis stumbled back. Face pale. What the hell is that? Claire's skin prickled. She tightened her grip on Boone, as if the dog were the only tether to reality. "Someone's in there," she whispered. "No," Travis muttered, shaking his head. "No one could." The boards banged again, louder, rattling with frantic force. The wailing grew sharper, almost words now, though mangled, strangled by wood. Travis swore, grabbed his radio. "Sheriff, you need to get down here. Now." "We got." The radio crackled and went dead. Static. He tapped it, shook it. Nothing. Claire looked toward the house. Hank was on the porch, staring, watching, his face unreadable. "Dad," she shouted. "Did you know about this?" No answer. Just the glow of another cigarette. Smoke curling into the cold air. By the time Sheriff Nolan arrived, the yard had drawn a crowd. Neighbors stood at the fence line, whispering. Word spread fast in Ashford Hollow. Nolan strode across the grass, jaw tight, eyes sweeping over the tree. He smelled it before he reached it. His face hardened. "Jesus," he muttered. Travis stepped forward, voice shaking. "Sheriff, it's hollowed out, built up inside. Something's in there." "Something or someone?" Nolan asked. "I don't know. It's making noise." Boone snarled, lunging again. Nolan crouched, peered into the gap. He listened. The sound came faint, broken words mashed into sobs. "Help, help." Nolan's hand twitched against his holster. "Get the boards off," he ordered. Travis hesitated. "Sheriff, what if—" "Now." They saw it again. Boone's barking went wild, frantic, like he wanted to tear the tree apart himself. As the second slab of bark fell, the inside came clearer. The room stretched narrow, coffin-like, walls reinforced with planks, floor covered in dirt. Old stains marked the boards, dark, spreading, and against the far side, crouched in shadow, something moved. A figure, thin, filthy, skin gray with grime, clothes hanging in tatters, hair matted, eyes too wide, reflecting the flashlight like an animal's. Claire gasped, "Oh my God!" The figure scrambled at the boards, clawing. Words broke free now, cracked with disuse. "Let me out." Nolan froze. His throat worked, but no words came. Behind Claire, Hank's voice carried. "Low, cold. You should have left it alone." Gasps rippled through the crowd. People turned. Nolan straightened, hand on his gun. "Hank, you want to explain this?" Hank stepped down from the porch, cigarette still between his fingers. His face was carved stone. Some things are meant to stay buried. Claire stared at him, horror rising. You knew someone was in there." Hank's eyes flicked to her, just once, soft with something like regret, then hard again. "I told you not to cut it." Nolan barked at Travis, "Get that person out." But the figure inside had already gone silent, retreating into the corner. Their eyes glistened in the dark. Hank's cigarette dropped to the dirt. He crushed it under his heel. "Sheriff," he said quietly, "you don't want to know what's in there." Nolan's gun cleared the holster. "Step back." But Hank didn't. He took another step forward. "You open it," Hank said, voice shaking now. "And it won't just ruin me. It'll ruin this whole goddamn town." Claire's breath caught. Betrayal cut through her chest sharper than fear. Her father, her quiet, steady father, had built this secret into the heart of their land. Boone lunged again, teeth bared, bark tearing the night apart. The figure inside wailed, voice cracking. And for the first time, Claire wondered if the real monster was in the tree, but standing right in front of her. The boards finally cracked loose under Travis's saw. Nolan reached in, grabbed the figure, and hauled him out into the daylight. The crowd gasped. Some screamed. It was a boy, maybe 12, maybe 13. Starved to bone, skin gray-blue, eyes glassy. His lips moved, but the words slurred. His legs buckled under him. Claire rushed forward, but Nolan held her back. "Don't touch him. Ambulance first." The boy collapsed in the dirt, wheezing. Boone shoved forward, licking his face, whining low and mournful. The boy's cracked lips formed one word, "Daddy," and his eyes fixed not on Nolan, not on Travis, but on Hank. Every sound in the yard died. Claire's knees went weak. Hank's face stayed stone, but his hands trembled. He looked down at the boy, then at the crowd, then at Nolan's gun. Finally, he said, "It's not what it looks like." The boy coughed blood, eyes rolling back. Claire whispered, "God, Dad, what did you do?" The boy lay in the dirt, gasping shallow, while Boone nudged his face like he could breathe life back into him. The neighbors pressed closer, their whispers sharp, jagged. Claire felt the world tilting beneath her. Her father, just stood there. Sheriff Nolan's gun didn't waver. His voice was iron. "Hank Callahan, you're under arrest." But Hank didn't flinch. "For what? You don't even know who he is." Claire's chest nodded. "Dad, he called you." Her voice broke. "He called you Daddy." Hank finally looked at her. His eyes weren't cruel. Not anymore. They were tired. Weighted with something he'd carried for too long. "Claire," he said softly, "it ain't that simple." The ambulance came fast, tires crunching on gravel. EMTs lifted the boy, so thin it seemed he might crack apart, and carried him into the rig. His eyes fluttered, but his hand reached weakly toward Hank. Boone trotted after until Claire pulled him back. The siren wailed into the distance, leaving silence behind. Nolan cuffed Hank's wrists. "You'll explain every bit of this downtown." Hank didn't resist, but his eyes stayed locked on the tree, that scarred trunk with its hollow secrets. As Nolan shoved him toward the cruiser, Hank spoke over his shoulder. "You don't know what you've done." The station stank of coffee and mildew. Hank sat at the table in the interview room, wrists chained. The one-way mirror reflected his own weary face back at him. Nolan stood opposite. Claire, against her better judgment, sat beside him. She had to hear it. "Start talking," Nolan said. Hank rubbed his wrists. "That boy, his name's Jesse. He ain't mine." Claire's stomach dropped. "Then why would he?" "Because I raised him like he was." The words cracked the room. Nolan leaned forward. "Explain." Hank's voice was rough, stripped bare. 14 years ago, there was a fire at the Weller house. You remember it, Sheriff. Nolan's jaw tightened. Everyone remembered. The blaze that gutted the farmhouse, killing the Wellers inside, all but their youngest son, whose body was never found. "They said Jesse died," Nolan muttered. Hank shook his head. "He didn't. I found him, pulled him out myself." Claire's chest clenched. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because Jesse wasn't right after. Something in him changed in that fire. He hurt things. Animals first, then kids at school." Hank's hands trembled. "I tried to get him help. Nobody believed me. They said he was just grieving. But I saw it. I saw the darkness in him." Nolan frowned. "So you locked him in a tree?" Hank's eyes burned. "I was protecting folks. Protecting this town. You think Ashford Hollow would have survived knowing it had a monster growing in it?" Claire whispered. Dad, he was just a boy. Hank's voice cracked. He stopped being just a boy. That night, Nolan drove Claire back to the farm. The oak loomed against the sky. Jagged wound cut into its trunk. Boone paced circles around it, restless. I don't buy half his story, Nolan said quietly. But something's off. Real off. Claire hugged her arms. If Jesse's been alive all this time, people must have heard him. Why didn't anyone else? Nolan shook his head. Maybe they did. Maybe they just didn't want to know. The thought sat heavy in her gut. Ashford Hollow had always been good at turning its eyes away. 2 nights later, the hospital called. Jesse was awake. Claire went alone. She had to. The boy lay pale against white sheets, for in his arm. His eyes found her as she stepped in. "You're Hank's girl," he rasped. Her throat went dry. "Yes." He smiled faint, teeth cracked and yellow. "He kept me safe." Her stomach turned. "Safe?" "He locked you in a tree." Jesse's smile widened. "Because I asked him to." The room chilled. "What?" Jesse's eyes gleamed, fever bright. "I told him I couldn't stop. Told him I'd hurt people again. I begged him to make me stay there. To keep everyone else safe from me." Claire stepped back, heart hammering. Jesse's voice dropped, soft as silk. "But now I'm out, and I don't want to stop anymore." She left the hospital shaking, the echo of his words gnawing through her bones. That night, Boone barked again. Not at the oak, not at the hollow, at the house. Claire grabbed the shotgun her father had kept by the door. The barking turned frantic. She rushed outside. The night smelled of smoke. The barn was on fire. Flames licked the roof, sparks raining across the field. Boone snarled, pulling toward the tree-line. And there, half in shadow, stood Jesse, watching, his thin figure lit orange by the blaze, smile carved across his face. Claire raised a shotgun. Her hand shook. "Jesse!" she screamed. He tilted his head. "He told you the truth, didn't he?" Her finger hovered on the trigger. "Go on," Jesse whispered. "Be the one to end me, or let me end you." Boone lunged. The gun roared. The shot missed. Jesse was gone, swallowed by the trees. By the time firefighters came, the barn was ash. Jesse was nowhere. Nolan cornered Claire, fury in his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me he'd woken up?" "I didn't think." "No," Nolan snapped. "You didn't. Now he's loose." Claire's chest hollowed. Somewhere in the woods, Jesse was breathing free, carrying every shadow Hank had warned of. Boone whined, pressing against her leg. She knelt, burying her face in his fur. Her father's voice rang in her head. "I was protecting this town. And now, with him behind bars, no one was." The weeks that followed carved Ashford Hollow raw. Fires in the night, animals slaughtered, children whispering about a figure at their windows. The town was too scared to speak it aloud, but everyone knew Jesse was out there. Hank's warnings turned from madness to prophecy. But it was too late. Claire carried the weight every day. If she'd listened, if she'd left the trees sealed, Jesse would still be trapped. Safe. Contained. Instead, he was free. Sometimes, in the dead hours, Boone barked again. Not at the oak. Not at the barn. At the woods. Always the woods. And Claire stood at the window, shotgun heavy in her hands, praying Jesse never stepped back into the light. Epilogue. Months later, the oak tree still stood, scarred, hollow, but standing. Claire visited often, Boone always at her side. She pressed her hand to the trunk, feeling the emptiness inside. Her father died in prison before trial. Heart gave out. His last letter to her was only one line. "You'll understand when it's too late." She did. Ashford Hollow would never be safe again. The monster wasn't buried anymore. And every time Boone's ears pricked, every time he barked at the darkness, Claire knew Jesse was still out there, waiting. The tree no longer held him. The town would. Forever.